My name is Sophia Scott, and my story is about the day my 500K inheritance was stolen by my sister, until I discovered a letter from my father that changed everything. What would you do if the person you trusted most in this world, your own blood, stole not just your money, but your entire future? If this story speaks to you, if you've ever been betrayed by someone close to you, please hit that like button and subscribe, because I need you to hear what happened next, and trust me, you won't believe where this leads. I remember sitting in my apartment completely broken, wondering how my own sister could do this to me, and that's when I found something that would turn my entire life around. A simple envelope with my father's handwriting on it. 3 words that started a journey I never expected. For my Sophia. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It lingers. It destroys your ability to trust, and it makes you question everything you thought you knew about your family. I felt this way for months after discovering what my sister, Victoria, had done. I couldn't sleep properly. I couldn't focus at work. And every time my phone rang, my heart would drop because I didn't know who to trust anymore. The worst part wasn't the money itself. It was what that money represented. It was my father's legacy, his love for me expressed in the most tangible way he could, and someone I grew up with, someone I shared my childhood with, simply took it and didn't look back. But here's where the story takes a turn I never saw coming. My father, even though he had passed away years before, had left me something far more valuable than money. He left me the truth, and he left me the tools to fight back, to reclaim what was mine, and most importantly, to rebuild myself into someone stronger than I ever imagined I could be. The discovery of that letter wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about discovering that I had the power within me to stand up for myself, to face my fears, and to demand justice. This is where our journey together begins, and I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't about dollars. It's about discovering your own strength. Let me take you back to where it all started, to the moment when my life completely fell apart, and I want you to understand not just what happened, but why it mattered so much to me. If you've ever lost something that felt like more than material wealth, something that represented safety, security, and your future, please stay with me. Hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the moment everything changed. My father passed away when I was 25 years old, and he left behind a detailed will that outlined how his estate should be divided between me and my sister Victoria. The inheritance was meant to be split equally, 500K for each of us. Money that was supposed to help us build our lives, buy homes, start businesses, or simply have the security that comes from knowing you're taken care of. What I didn't know was that Victoria had other plans, and she had been planning this long before our father's funeral was even over. She forged documents, manipulated the estate manager with lies and false claims, and somehow convinced everyone that a significant portion of my inheritance was actually meant for her, that there was some kind of mistake in the will, some hidden debt our father had supposedly owed her. The pain of this betrayal wasn't just financial, it was emotional, it was psychological, and it shook me to my core in ways I'm still processing even now. I trusted my sister completely. I never thought to question what she was doing, and by the time I realized what had happened, the money was gone, transferred to accounts I couldn't touch, and she was completely denying any involvement. The worst part of this entire experience was the feeling of helplessness, the sense that I had no control over my own life, my own future, and that someone I loved had systematically stripped me of my security and left me questioning everything. I remember crying myself to sleep for weeks, thinking about all the dreams I had for that money, my own apartment, the ability to take time off work, the freedom to pursue what I actually wanted instead of just surviving paycheck to paycheck. But then something shifted inside me, something deep and powerful, and I realized that sitting in my pain wasn't going to change anything. I needed to find answers. I needed to uncover the truth, and that's when I made the decision that would lead me to my father's letter and ultimately to my own redemption. Everything changed in that moment, and you're about to discover exactly why. 3 months after my father's funeral, I received a call from the estate manager that would shake my entire world. He told me that my share of the inheritance had already been processed and transferred, but the amount was significantly less than what my father had promised me in his will. I need you to understand something right now, because if you've ever felt the crushing weight of betrayal by someone you love, I want you to know you're not alone. Please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and let me know in the comments if you've ever been deceived by family, because your story matters and I want to hear it. My sister Victoria had gone to the estate manager with forged documents, fake bills supposedly owed by my father, and fabricated stories about debts he had left behind. And somehow, she convinced him that a large portion of my inheritance needed to go to her instead. What made it worse was that she had done this so smoothly, so professionally, that nobody questioned it. By the time I found out, the money was already gone, and she was acting completely innocent whenever I confronted her. I remember the exact moment I realized what had happened. I was sitting at my desk at work, trying to process the numbers the estate manager had given me, when it hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had trusted my sister. I had grieved with her. I had believed we were going through this loss together. And all the while, she was systematically stealing from me, lying to my face, and pretending everything was fine. The rage I felt was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't just anger. It was betrayal mixed with disbelief, all wrapped up in the realization that someone I had shared my entire life with could be so calculated, so cold, and so willing to destroy me for money. I confronted Victoria that same day, and her response was what truly broke me. She denied everything. She twisted the narrative. She made me feel like I was being unreasonable and paranoid for even suggesting she would do something like this. But here's the thing about being gaslit by someone close to you. It makes you doubt your own reality, your own perception of events, and suddenly you're wondering if maybe you're the one being unfair. If maybe your father really did owe her money, if maybe the documents were real. I started going through everything, asking questions, trying to find proof. But Victoria had covered her tracks so well that I couldn't find anything concrete, just suspicions, just the feeling in my gut that told me something was deeply wrong, but nothing I could actually prove. That's when I decided I needed to search my father's belongings more carefully, to go through his things with a different perspective. Because something inside me told me he wouldn't leave me with nothing. He wouldn't allow my sister to steal from me without leaving some kind of trail, some kind of message. And that's exactly what I found. Something that would change everything. I was cleaning out my father's old study one rainy afternoon, feeling completely defeated and hopeless, when I found an old wooden box hidden behind a loose panel in his desk. A box I had never noticed before despite visiting that study hundreds of times in my life. If you're watching this right now and you feel like you've hit rock bottom, like there's no way out of your situation, I need you to stay with me. Hit that like button, subscribe for what comes next, and trust me when I say that sometimes the universe sends us exactly what we need when we need it most. The box was old, made of dark mahogany, and it had my name written on it in my father's handwriting. Just 3 words. For my Sophia. My hands were shaking as I opened it, and inside I found not just money. There were stacks of bills, old documents, photographs, and most importantly, a sealed envelope with another note attached that said, "Open only when you need the truth." I stood there in that study, tears streaming down my face, because I suddenly understood that my father had known something was coming, that he had prepared for this moment, that even in his absence, he was protecting me. When I opened that envelope and read the letter inside, my entire perspective shifted. My father had written a detailed account of his will, including a backup copy with his attorney's signature, and more importantly, he had documented something he had discovered about Victoria's activities before he passed away. He wrote about conversations he'd overheard, suspicious financial transfers he'd noticed, and his concerns about her character, but he had decided not to confront her directly because he didn't want to cause a family rift while he was still alive. What he did instead was create a protection plan for me. He had prepared legal documents, he had informed his attorney about his suspicions, and he had left me clear instructions on exactly what to do if I ever found myself in this situation. The letter wasn't just about the money, it was about my father's love for me, his desire to protect me even after death, and his belief that I had the strength to handle the truth and fight for what was rightfully mine. Reading those words felt like he was speaking to me from beyond. like he was wrapping his arms around me and saying, "I believe in you, Sophia, and I always will." But the most shocking revelation came in the final paragraph of the letter. My father revealed that the 500K inheritance I thought was stolen wasn't actually the full picture of what he had left me. There was more, much more. And Victoria didn't even know about the majority of his wealth because it had been placed in a trust that could only be accessed by following the specific instructions in the letter. As I read those words, I felt something awaken inside me. Not anger anymore, but clarity. Not desperation anymore, but power. And suddenly I understood that this betrayal, as painful as it had been, was the catalyst that would push me to discover who I really was and what I was capable of achieving. My father had essentially left me not just money, but the truth. And the truth, as they say, is the most powerful weapon anyone can possess. The moment I finished reading that letter, I made a decision. I was going to fight back, not out of revenge, but out of respect for my father's memory and my own self-worth. When I sat down with my father's attorney, Mr. Harrison, and he began explaining the full extent of my father's estate, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my family's wealth was only scratching the surface of the truth. If you're struggling right now, if you feel like you don't have all the information you need to make the right decisions in your life, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because what I'm about to share with you might just be the wake-up call you've been waiting for. My father wasn't just a successful businessman. He was someone who had built an empire over decades, and he had carefully structured his assets in ways that Victoria knew absolutely nothing about because he had deliberately kept that information from her after noticing her financial irresponsibility years earlier. The 500K that I thought was my entire inheritance was merely the liquid assets that were visible on the surface. The real wealth was hidden in trusts, investment portfolios, and properties that had been placed under my name the moment I turned 18. Something my father had done as a precaution against exactly this kind of situation. Mr. Harrison showed me documents spanning 30 years, stock investments, real estate holdings, business partnerships, and trust funds that my father had meticulously set up to protect me from people who might try to manipulate or control me. As he walked me through the numbers, my entire body went numb. We were talking about millions, not hundreds of thousands, and all of it had been secured in my name with specific instructions that could only be accessed with proof of the letter and my father's authentication code. I started crying again, but this time it wasn't tears of despair. It was tears of understanding, of gratitude, of finally grasping just how much my father loved me, and how he had spent years planning to make sure I would never be left vulnerable or dependent on anyone's goodwill. The irony was almost poetic. My sister had spent all this time and effort to steal what she thought was everything, only to discover that she had stolen nothing compared to what was actually waiting for me all along. But here's what really struck me as I sat there in Mr. Harrison's office, surrounded by documents that changed my entire future. My father's greatest gift wasn't the money at all. It was the knowledge that he had believed in me enough to think I could handle this, that I was strong enough to uncover the truth, and that I deserved to inherit not just wealth, but also the confidence to use it wisely. The letter explained that my father had watched me grow up, and he had deliberately avoided making life easy for me because he wanted me to develop resilience, character, and the ability to stand on my own 2 feet. The money was never meant to be a handout, but rather a safety net for someone who had already proven herself capable and worthy. In that moment, I understood that this betrayal by my sister, as devastating as it had been, was actually a gift in disguise. It had forced me to grow, to question, to fight, and to discover that I possessed an inner strength I never knew I had, and that strength was worth more than all the money in the world. Let me be honest with you about something that nobody really talks about when they discuss betrayal. It's not just about the material loss. It's about the psychological damage that comes with realizing someone you loved was willing to hurt you for personal gain, and that's a wound that doesn't heal quickly or easily. If you've ever felt that particular kind of pain, that specific ache that comes from betrayal by blood, I want you to know that you deserve to feel angry, you deserve to grieve, and you deserve to take the time you need to process what happened. Please subscribe and hit that like button, because we're about to talk about the most important part of this entire journey. In the months after discovering Victoria's betrayal, I went through stages of grief that psychologists usually describe as part of trauma recovery, denial, where I kept thinking there had to be some mistake, anger, where I wanted to scream and rage at the injustice of it all, bargaining, where I tried to imagine scenarios where she hadn't meant to hurt me, depression, where I questioned everything about myself and my ability to judge character, and finally, acceptance, where I came to terms with who my sister really was, separate from who I had wanted her to be. The hardest part of this entire experience wasn't losing the money. It was losing the sister I thought I had. It was mourning the family relationship I believed was real, but turned out to be built on lies and manipulation. I spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the memories we shared, wondering how many of those moments were genuine and how many were calculated on her part, wondering if she had ever actually loved me, or if I was always just a target to her. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. I felt ashamed for trusting her so completely, and I felt broken because the one person I should have been able to depend on, the one person who shared my grief over losing our father, had instead used that vulnerability against me. The betrayal wasn't just about what she took from me materially. It was about the trust she shattered, the security she destroyed, and the innocence I lost when I realized that someone who shared my blood could be so cruel, so calculated, and so completely willing to destroy me without even looking back. But as I began reading my father's letter repeatedly, as I started to understand his wisdom and his protective instincts, something shifted inside me. I realized that while Victoria had taken my inheritance, she had inadvertently given me something far more valuable. A reason to stand up for myself, a catalyst to discover my own strength, and proof that I didn't need anyone's love or validation to know my own worth. My father had taught me through his actions and his careful planning that true love isn't about making life easy for someone. It's about believing in them enough to let them struggle, to let them fight, and to trust that they have what it takes to overcome whatever obstacles come their way. The pain of Victoria's betrayal became the soil from which my transformation grew. Every tear I cried, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt and fear, all of it served as fuel for my determination to rebuild myself, to reclaim what was mine, and to become someone who could never be hurt in this way again. That reflection, that deep emotional reckoning with what had happened and what it meant about me, my family, and my place in the world, was the turning point that made everything that came next possible. After spending weeks processing everything I had discovered, crying, journaling, and talking to a therapist who helped me understand the psychological impacts of what had happened, I reached a point where I had to make a decision. I could either stay broken and let Victoria win, or I could stand up and fight for what was rightfully mine and for the legacy my father had left me. If you're at a crossroads right now, if you're wondering whether you should fight for yourself or just accept defeat, I need you to hear this. Please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and know that the choice to fight back isn't about revenge. It's about respecting yourself and honoring those who believed in you. What made this decision possible wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. It was my father's words echoing in my mind. It was the realization that I had the tools, the evidence, and the strength to do what needed to be done, and that staying silent would be a betrayal of everything my father had taught me about standing up for what's right. I called Mr. Harrison and told him I was ready to move forward legally, ready to confront Victoria, and ready to reclaim not just my inheritance, but my power and my voice, which she had stolen just as effectively as she had stolen the money. The courage didn't come from nowhere. It came from understanding that I wasn't just fighting for money, I was fighting for the principle of it, for justice, for the right to not be taken advantage of by someone I loved, and for the protection of my father's legacy and his memory. I spent time with my father's letter, reading it over and over, and every time I read it, I felt stronger, more convinced that this was what he would have wanted. This was what he had prepared me for through all those years of teaching me independence and resilience. I also started talking to people I trusted, my best friend Marcus, my mentor at work, my therapist, and everyone told me the same thing. I had every right to be angry. I had every right to fight back, and they would support me no matter what happened. That support network became my foundation, my safety net, and it gave me the courage to take the first real step toward confronting Victoria and demanding accountability for what she had done. I wasn't alone in this anymore, and that made all the difference. What surprised me most was how empowering it felt to make the decision to fight. It was like flipping a switch inside me that I didn't even know existed. Suddenly, I wasn't a victim anymore. I was someone taking action, someone reclaiming control over my life and my future. The fear didn't disappear. I was terrified of what might happen, terrified of the confrontation, terrified of the legal process ahead. But underneath that fear was a solid core of determination and self-respect that I had never felt before, and that feeling was stronger than any fear could ever be. My therapist explained to me that this was a crucial moment of empowerment, that moving from victim mentality to survivor mentality, and ultimately to a place of agency and control, was the real victory. The money would follow, but the transformation happening inside me was the true inheritance from my father. I realized in that moment that my father hadn't left me just money and protection. He had left me an example of how to stand up, how to fight, and how to believe in yourself even when the world is telling you to give up, and I was finally ready to follow his example. As I began to take the steps necessary to address Victoria's betrayal, something unexpected happened. I started questioning not just her, but every relationship in my life, wondering which people were genuinely on my side, and which people were there only when it was convenient for them. If you've ever felt paranoid after a betrayal, if you've wondered who you can really trust and whether you're being naive or realistic, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share your experience in the comments, because so many people go through this and feel completely alone. What I discovered through this process of reflection was that my entire approach to relationships had been built on a foundation of blind trust. I had assumed that because people were family or friends, they automatically deserved my complete faith and my vulnerability, and I had never bothered to actually observe their behavior, their values, or their patterns to see whether they had actually earned that trust. This realization was painful, but it was also liberating, because I understood that my tendency to trust blindly wasn't a character flaw. It was actually a beautiful quality that my father had intentionally nurtured in me, but he had also taught me that trust needs to be balanced with awareness, with discernment, and with a strong sense of self that doesn't depend on external validation. I started paying attention to the people in my life in a completely different way. I noticed who showed up when I was struggling, who asked genuine questions about how I was doing, and who seemed more interested in their own lives than in my well-being. And this simple practice of observation shifted my understanding of every single relationship I had. Marcus, my best friend, had been texting me every single day asking how I was doing, offering to listen, offering to help in any way he could, and I realized that this was what real friendship looked like. It was showing up consistently, asking questions, and being present without expecting anything in return. My mentor at work, Jennifer, had taken me out to lunch and told me about her own family trauma, her own experiences with betrayal, and she had given me practical advice while also validating my pain, and I understood that this was what genuine mentorship meant. It was sharing wisdom earned through lived experience. On the other hand, there were people I had considered close friends who had completely disappeared once they learned about my situation, people who had offered sympathy but no actual support, and people who had even sided with Victoria or defended her actions, which told me everything I needed to know about who I could actually trust. But the most important relationship I needed to reevaluate was the one I had with myself. I had to stop looking outside of myself for permission, for validation, for confirmation that my feelings were legitimate and my choices were right. My father's letter had repeatedly emphasized the importance of self-trust, of listening to my own intuition, of believing in myself even when others doubted me. And I realized that this was the real skill I needed to develop, not the ability to read people perfectly, but the ability to trust my own judgment about them, and to act on that judgment regardless of what anyone else thought. I started practicing this by making small decisions completely independently: what to eat, where to go, what books to read, and then gradually moving to bigger decisions: how to handle the legal process with Victoria, how to communicate with family members about what was happening, how to structure my life moving forward. Each time I trusted my own intuition and it turned out to be right, I gained more confidence in my ability to navigate life on my own terms, and each time my gut feeling warned me about someone or something and I chose to listen, I avoided potential problems and protected myself more effectively. The real awakening wasn't about becoming suspicious or cynical. It was about becoming more discerning, more self-aware, and more grounded in my own sense of right and wrong. And that transformation was the foundation for everything that came next in this journey. With my attorney, Mr. Harrison, by my side and my evidence carefully organized, I began the process of preparing for what would be the most difficult conversation of my life, confronting my sister Victoria with the truth and demanding accountability for what she had done to me and to our father's legacy. If you're about to have a difficult conversation with someone who has hurt you, if you're scared about what might happen but you know you have to do it anyway, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share your story in the comments because your courage matters and your voice deserves to be heard. What I learned during this preparation phase was that confrontation isn't about winning an argument or proving someone wrong. It's about standing firmly in your truth, presenting facts that cannot be disputed, and refusing to allow someone to gaslight you or make you doubt your own reality, no matter how angry or defensive they become. I gathered all the documents, all the forged signatures, all the bank records that showed the transfers, and I had Mr. Harrison review everything with me multiple times to ensure I understood every detail, because I knew that Victoria would try to confuse me, try to make things complicated, and I needed to be so prepared that no amount of manipulation could shake my confidence in what I knew. I also spent time preparing myself emotionally for the conversation. I practiced what I would say. I imagined different scenarios of how she might react, and I worked with my therapist to manage my anxiety and my need for her to understand, to apologize, to acknowledge the harm she had caused. One of the most important things my therapist helped me understand was that I couldn't control Victoria's response. I could only control my own words, my own boundaries, and my own commitment to the truth, and that was enough. I didn't need her to admit everything. I didn't need her to apologize. I just needed to say my piece and let the evidence speak for itself. I also made a crucial decision. I decided to record the conversation with her, both audio and on video, because I knew that she would likely deny what she had done and then claim I had misunderstood her or misrepresented what she said. And I wanted to have documentation of exactly what transpired so there could be no argument about it later. This might sound calculated, but it wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. It was about ensuring that when the legal proceedings began, I had irrefutable evidence of her behavior and her admissions or denials. The night before the confrontation, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about our childhood together, about the sister I thought I knew, about whether there was any possibility that I was wrong about all of this, about whether I should just let it go and move forward with my life without dragging her into a legal battle. But then I read my father's letter again, and I saw the part where he wrote, "Sophia, if you ever find yourself in a situation where someone has taken advantage of your trust, remember that holding them accountable isn't cruel. It's necessary, not just for you, but for everyone else they might hurt in the future." And I felt the clarity return. I felt my resolve strengthen, and I knew that what I was about to do wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting the integrity of my father's legacy and ensuring that Victoria couldn't continue to manipulate and deceive others. I got out of bed at 3 a.m. and sent her a message asking her to meet me at a coffee shop near my apartment the next afternoon. I chose a public place intentionally so that if things got heated, there would be witnesses and she would be less likely to become physically aggressive or completely lose control. When she responded with a simple, "Okay," I felt my heart racing, but I also felt something else. I felt ready. I felt prepared, and I felt the presence of my father behind me, supporting me, believing in me, giving me the strength I needed to do what came next. The moment Victoria walked into that coffee shop and saw me sitting at a corner table with a folder full of documents in front of me, I saw the color drain from her face. She knew in that instant that I had figured everything out, that I was no longer the confused and devastated sister she had been able to manipulate for the past year, and that everything was about to change. If you're watching this right now, and you've ever confronted someone about a lie they told you, if you know what it feels like to see guilt wash over their face in real time, Please hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments because that moment is a turning point and it deserves to be witnessed and validated. We sat down. I didn't waste any time with small talk or pleasantries. I opened the folder and I laid out the documents, one by one, showing her the forged signatures, the fake bills, the estate manager's testimony about how she had manipulated him, the bank records showing exactly where the money had gone, and with each document, I watched her face change from shock to anger to panic to defensiveness. I told her calmly and clearly, "Victoria, I found Dad's letter, and he documented everything. He had suspected what you were doing. He left me proof, and now I have all the evidence I need to take you to court if necessary." And I watched as she started to break, as the reality of her situation began to sink in, as she realized that there was no way to deny this, or wiggle her way out of it like she had done so many times before. Her first response was exactly what I expected. She denied everything. She claimed that the documents were forged by me, that Mr. Harrison was lying, that I was turning our father against her from beyond the grave, and she tried to twist the narrative to make herself look like the victim in this situation. She said things like, "Sophia, how could you do this to your own sister? Dad always loved you more than he loved me. And I needed that money for legitimate reasons that you wouldn't understand. And you're destroying our family for what? For revenge. Is money really worth destroying everything?" These words were painful to hear, not because they contained any truth, but because they revealed how little regard she had for me as a person, how willing she was to keep lying and manipulating even when confronted with irrefutable evidence, and how she expected me to cave under the emotional pressure like I always had before. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't the same Sophia who would feel guilty at her accusations, who would doubt herself when faced with her anger, who would prioritize her feelings over my own truth and my own healing. I looked her directly in the eyes and I said, "I'm not doing this out of revenge, Victoria. I'm doing this out of respect for myself and for Dad's memory. And if that makes me the bad guy in your version of this story, then I've made peace with that." What happened next was the moment I had been both dreading and waiting for. After about 40 minutes of denial, accusation, and manipulation, Victoria finally broke down completely. Her face crumpled, tears streamed down her face, and she admitted everything. She confessed to forging the documents, to manipulating the estate manager, to intentionally stealing my inheritance because she felt like our father had always favored me, had always believed in me, and she had resented me for years because of it. She said, "I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm sorry. I know what I did was wrong. I was angry and broken and I took it out on you." And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I didn't feel the rage I had expected to feel. I didn't feel the desire for revenge or punishment that I thought would bring me satisfaction. Instead, I felt sadness. I felt compassion for my sister, and I felt the weight of understanding that she too had been broken by our father's death. She too had struggled to process her grief. She too had made terrible choices because she was suffering. But I also understood something crucial. Her confession, while important, didn't erase what she had done. It didn't automatically mean I could forgive her or trust her again. And it didn't change the fact that I needed to protect myself and ensure that there were legal consequences for her actions. So she understood the seriousness of what she had done, and so she couldn't do this to someone else, maybe even to me again. I told her that I would be proceeding with the legal case, that I would be seeking restitution, but I also told her that if she was willing to seek professional help, if she was willing to do the work to understand why she had made these choices, then perhaps someday, far in the future, there might be a path to reconciliation, but that path couldn't begin until she had faced the full consequences of her actions and genuinely worked on healing herself. After Victoria's confession that day in the coffee shop, everything changed. The legal case that Mr. Harrison had been preparing took on a different character, because now I had her admission in writing, I had her recorded confession, and I had all the documentation needed to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that she had deliberately and maliciously stolen from me. If you've ever experienced a moment where someone finally admitted to hurting you, if you know what it feels like to have your truth validated after being gaslit for so long, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share how that moment felt for you, because vindication is a real emotion, and it deserves recognition. What surprised me most wasn't the confession itself. It was what came after. The weeks of Victoria reaching out to me through emails, through mutual friends, through our extended family, trying to explain herself, trying to apologize, trying to convince me that this one terrible decision didn't define her entire character, and I had to make the painful realization that her apologies weren't for me. They were for her. They were her attempt to manage her own guilt and to try to get me to absolve her so she could feel better about what she had done. I realized that true reconciliation would require far more than words. It would require genuine accountability. It would require her taking responsibility in front of our family. It would require her facing legal consequences. And most importantly, it would require her doing deep internal work to understand why she had been capable of such betrayal in the first place. The admission changed how I approached the legal proceedings. I realized I could be firm and compassionate simultaneously. I could hold her accountable while also acknowledging that she was suffering, that she had made terrible choices from a place of pain, but that pain didn't excuse her actions and it didn't absolve her of the responsibility to make things right. I worked with Mr. Harrison to structure a settlement that would require Victoria to repay me not just the $500K she had stolen, but also interest, legal fees, and damages for the emotional distress she had caused. But I also included provisions for her to seek professional mental health treatment and to participate in family counseling if and when I felt ready to consider reconciliation. This wasn't about punishing her. It was about ensuring that she understood the full weight of her actions, that she couldn't simply throw an apology at me and move on with her life as if nothing had happened, and that there were real, tangible consequences to betraying someone's trust in such a fundamental way. When Victoria signed the settlement agreement, she wept openly, and I saw something in that moment that I had never expected to see. I saw a broken person who had made terrible choices, and while that didn't erase what she had done or suddenly make her behavior acceptable, it did help me understand that her cruelty had come from her own internal pain, from her own insecurity, from her own struggle to process grief and loss in a healthy way. What I learned from Victoria's admission and the aftermath was that victory isn't as sweet as people think it is. I had won, the case was settled, I had gotten my money back, plus additional compensation, but the victory came with complicated emotions that didn't fit neatly into categories of triumph or justice or revenge. I felt sadness that my sister had been capable of this. I felt anger that it had taken so long and caused so much pain for her to admit the truth. I felt compassion for her suffering, and I felt gratitude that she had finally confessed, because it meant I could stop living in a state of uncertainty, wondering if maybe I had misunderstood something, wondering if maybe she really wasn't guilty. The confession freed me from that doubt. It gave me permission to move forward without that lingering "what if" hanging over my head. The real victory wasn't winning the case or getting the money back. It was the clarity I gained, the strength I developed, and the understanding that I had been right to trust my instincts all along, that my father had been right to prepare me for this moment, and that I had proven to myself that I was capable of standing up for what I believed in, even when it meant confronting someone I loved and risking the destruction of a family relationship that I had desperately wanted to save. With the settlement finalized and Victoria's repayment plan in place, I could finally begin the process of accessing the full inheritance that my father had left for me. The trust funds, the investment portfolios, the real estate holdings, and all the other assets that had been safely protected in my name all along. If you're at the stage in your journey where you're finally getting what you deserve, if you're stepping into your power and claiming what has always been yours, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and tell me in the comments what you're going to do with your newfound freedom, because celebrating your wins is important, and you deserve that celebration. Mr. Harrison guided me through the process of transferring assets, of understanding the tax implications, of learning how to manage significant wealth responsibly, and most importantly, of honoring my father's intentions for these resources. He had left me detailed notes about how he had hoped I would use the money, what values he wanted me to uphold, and what he believed would bring me the most fulfillment. My father had written in one of his letters, "Sophia, I'm not leaving you this money so you can just exist comfortably. I'm leaving it to you so you can create the life you truly want, so you can help others, so you can build something meaningful, and so you can never again feel dependent on anyone else's goodwill or approval. And those words became my guiding principle as I began to think about what came next. The financial restoration was significant. Suddenly, I had access to resources that allowed me to quit the job I had been struggling in, to pursue education in something I was passionate about, to invest in my mental health and personal development, and to start thinking about the future I wanted to create for myself, rather than the future that circumstances had forced upon me. But more than the material freedom, what I experienced was a kind of spiritual restoration. I realized that my father's legacy wasn't ultimately about money at all. It was about autonomy. It was about self-determination. It was about having the freedom to make choices based on what I wanted rather than what I needed to survive. I used some of the money to travel, to heal, to spend time in places that brought me joy and peace, and I invested in therapy and coaching to process the trauma of what had happened and to build even stronger foundations for my mental and emotional well-being. I also made the decision to establish a scholarship fund in my father's name for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds, young women like my father had believed I was, resilient, capable, deserving of support and opportunity, and this act of giving became one of the most healing things I could have done, because it transformed my suffering into purpose, it turned my pain into something that could benefit others, and it honored my father's memory in a way that money alone could never have. Done. What the restoration of my legacy taught me was that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in freedom, in autonomy, in the ability to make choices from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, and in having the resources to not just survive but to thrive and to contribute meaningfully to the world around you. The journey from devastation to recovery, from victim to survivor to someone empowered and thriving, took months of hard work, emotional processing, difficult conversations, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about myself, my family, and the world. But standing on the other side of that journey, I can tell you without hesitation that it was worth every painful moment, every tear, every night I couldn't sleep because my mind was racing with questions and fears, because I came out of it not just with my inheritance restored, but with myself restored, with my confidence rebuilt, with my capacity for love and trust repaired in a way that made it stronger and more discerning than it had ever been before. My father's greatest gift to me wasn't the money or the protection, or even the evidence he left me. It was his belief in my strength, his faith that I could handle whatever life threw at me, and his legacy of resilience that I now carry forward into everything I do, every choice I make, and every person I help along the way. As I sit here today, looking back at everything that has happened, I realize that this entire journey, from the moment I discovered my inheritance had been stolen to the moment I reclaimed not just my money but my life, was never really about revenge or retribution at all. It was about discovering who I truly was when everything was stripped away, when I had to stand alone, when I couldn't hide behind anyone else's strength or lean on anyone else's support. It was about finding that unshakable core inside me that my father had always believed was there, even when I didn't believe in it myself. The betrayal by Victoria will always be a part of my story, but it's no longer the most important part. What matters now is what I did with that pain, how I transformed it into power, and how I learned to build a life where my worth isn't dependent on anyone's approval or anyone's honesty, but on my own unwavering belief in myself. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about erasing what someone did or pretending it didn't hurt. Forgiveness is about releasing the hold that hurt has over your future, and I've had to do that work gradually, piece by piece, sometimes moving forward and sometimes sliding backward, but always, always continuing to move toward healing. What this experience taught me is that the people we trust most have the power to hurt us most deeply, but they also have the power to teach us the most valuable lessons about resilience, about boundaries, and about the importance of trusting ourselves over trusting blindly in others. My sister's betrayal became the catalyst that forced me to grow up, to stop being naive, to start paying attention to people's actions rather than their words. and to understand that love and trust are two different things. You can love someone completely and still not be able to trust them with your vulnerability. I also learned that justice doesn't always look like sweet revenge or perfect vindication. Sometimes justice is simply standing up for yourself. Sometimes it's walking away. Sometimes it's allowing someone to face consequences for their actions. And sometimes it's choosing to move forward and build something better rather than getting stuck in bitterness and anger. The real victory in my story isn't that I got my money back or that my sister finally admitted the truth. The real victory is that I discovered I was stronger than my circumstances, more resilient than my pain, and more capable of creating the life I wanted than I ever believed possible when I was at my lowest point. When I read my father's letter now, I don't just see the words on the page. I see his love. I see his belief in me. I see his intention to protect me and empower me. And I understand that the greatest gift he gave me wasn't the money or the protection. It was the knowledge that someone who loved me deeply believed I could handle whatever life threw at me. I think about Victoria sometimes, and I don't feel anger anymore. I feel sadness that she made the choices she did, compassion for her suffering, and hope that she will eventually do the work to heal herself and understand why she was capable of such betrayal. I've come to understand that holding on to anger toward her would only hurt me, would only keep me connected to the pain, would only prevent me from fully stepping into the life my father wanted me to build. And so I've made the conscious decision to release that anger and to focus instead on gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that led to my growth, gratitude for the betrayal that led to my awakening, and gratitude for my father's wisdom that ultimately saved me. Standing here today, I want you to understand that the true inheritance my father left me is not a dollar amount. It's the strength to stand up when I've been knocked down. It's the courage to face difficult truths. It's the wisdom to know when to fight and when to let go. And it's the unshakable knowledge that I am worthy of respect, of loyalty, and of a life built on my own terms and according to my own values. My story doesn't end with the settlement or the money being restored. It ends with me stepping into a version of myself that I never knew existed, a version that is stronger, more aware, more compassionate, and infinitely more powerful than I was before all of this happened. I've learned that revenge isn't sweet, healing is sweet, growth is sweet, and the knowledge that you survived something that was meant to destroy you is the sweetest feeling in the entire world. I'm no longer waiting for permission from anyone to be happy, to be successful, to be worthy of good things in my life, and that shift in my mindset has changed everything. It's changed my relationships, it's changed my career, it's changed my future, and it's changed the way I see myself every single day. I want you to know that whatever you're going through right now, whatever betrayal you've experienced, whatever injustice has been done to you, you have within you the same strength that I discovered within myself. You don't have to see it yet. You don't have to feel it yet, but it's there, and it's waiting for you to access it. I'm not going to tell you that everything will work out perfectly, that justice will always be served, or that the people who hurt you will always face consequences, because that's not always how life works, and you deserve better than false promises. What I will tell you is that you have the ability to decide what this experience means. You have the power to choose how you respond to betrayal, and you have the capacity to transform pain into purpose, suffering into strength, and victimhood into agency. That's the real inheritance, and it belongs to you whether you claim it or not. My father believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and now I'm asking you to believe in yourself the way he believed in me, because your story matters, your pain is valid, and your capacity to overcome is absolutely real and absolutely within your reach. The moment I stopped waiting for Victoria to apologize, stopped waiting for the world to make things right, and started taking action on my own behalf, that was the moment everything changed. That was when I stepped into my power. That was when I became the author of my own story instead of a victim in someone else's narrative. I'm telling you this because I need you to know that you have that same power, that same ability, that same right to take action and to demand better for yourself, not out of revenge or anger, but out of respect for yourself and out of commitment to the life you deserve to live. The inheritance I received was incredibly valuable, but the inheritance I'm giving to myself every single day, the inheritance I'm creating through my actions and my choices, and my commitment to living authentically, that's something no one can ever take away from me. And that's something you can claim for yourself right now, in this moment, if you're willing to do the work and willing to believe in your own strength. If you've watched this entire story and felt something shift inside you, if you've recognized parts of your own journey and my journey, if you've felt the call to stand up for yourself and demand better from your life and from the people in it, I need you to do something for me right now. First, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel because we're going to be sharing more stories like this. More stories of people who faced betrayal and came out stronger on the other side, and I need to know that you're with me on this journey. Second, I want you to go into the comments and tell me, what would you have done in my place? If you discovered that someone close to you had stolen from you, would you have fought back like I did? Or would you have chosen a different path? Your perspective matters. And I genuinely want to hear from you because this community is built on people being brave enough to share their truth and to learn from each other's experiences. If you've been through a betrayal within your family, or if you've felt completely powerless in the face of injustice, I want you to know that you are not alone. And more importantly, I want you to know that the power to reclaim your life is already inside you. You just need to access it. Make sure you turn on those notifications so you don't miss our next video, where we're going to talk about how to rebuild your life after losing everything, and how to create a foundation so solid that no one can ever take advantage of you again. I'm also creating a resource guide that walks through the legal process of dealing with inheritance theft and family fraud. And if you want access to that, leave a comment saying, "Send me the guide," and I'll reach out to you directly with all the information you need to protect yourself and your family assets. Before you go, I want to leave you with one final thought. The true measure of your strength isn't whether you've been knocked down, it's whether you choose to stand back up. And my friend, I believe you have what it takes to stand up, to stand tall, and to build a life that honors your worth and reflects your potential. I'll see you in the next video, and remember, your story isn't over. Your best chapters are still being written, and I can't wait to see what you create when you finally start believing in yourself the way I believe in you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for witnessing my story, and thank you for being brave enough to work on your own.